if you like your old cars modern enough to be able to use them all the time and all year round if you want, then what about the BMW E30?
But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So click the link below at the end of the video to enter their latest competition.
So what do you need to know? Well, you've got a whole range of engines. Firstly, there's the M10 four-cylinder, which was carried over from the old previous E21 generation, and before that was used in the 2002. And you've got the M20 six-cylinder, the so-called small six, which was the 320i, the 323i, and the 325i. You've also got the later M40 four-cylinder and the M42, which was the 16-valve version of that. They're all pretty typical, robust German engineering. Have a look under the bonnet and see what there is to watch out for on this, which is a 320i. So this is a 320i, which means we've got fuel-injected, 2-litre M26 cylinder. Problems should be pretty obvious. The six-cylinder engine did have a reputation for cracking heads, and it'll be obvious from running problems and things like oil in the coolant and things like that. There was also a procedure to replace the original hex head cylinder head bolts with Torx bolts, and it was done in service and without removing the head, replacing them one by one. To be honest, problems should be pretty obvious with these engines. As long as they've been set up right, they should run cleanly, start from cold cleanly, and pull nicely. And again, the M10 and indeed the M40, they're very similar too. Any problems should be pretty much obvious. If they're smoking or rattling, then you know there's something wrong. Personally, I prefer the six-cylinder. The 325i has got the 170 horsepower, so it goes a bit better. But even this 320i, it's a lovely smooth engine, and it suits the convertible as well. And this one's a manual, so it's it's got a decent turn of speed. As ever with any old BMW, keep an eye on the cooling system, because people just seem to assume they're so bulletproof they don't need servicing, and that's not really the case. So make sure the radiator isn't all holed and leaking. Make sure the pipe works up to standard and the thermostat works and all these sort of things, and it should pretty much reward you with trouble-free service. As for the rest of the oily bits, the transmission, if the shift feels really, really rubbery and wobbly, especially when it's in gear, it doesn't necessarily mean anything's terminal. It just means you need to replace the nylon bush at the bottom of the lever in the linkage, and that can make a huge difference. But it's difficult to get to because you've got to reach over the prop shaft. If you can hear a banging when you pull away, it's probably the prop shaft centre bushing. And if the whole thing feels a little bit loose and baggy, probably look at the gearbox mounts and the rubber prop shaft couplings as well. As I say, you can buy all the parts very easily, and a lot of service parts for these cars you can still buy from the likes of GSF and Euro Car Parts. So they're easy to keep going. You don't have to wait weeks for parts to arrive, and you don't have to search for used parts. And with a little bit of DIY skills, you can take a sort of tired E30 and you can work on it at home, and you can make it feel quite tight and nice again. So they're quite rewarding in that respect. So when you're assessing the car, one of the best things to look for is the bumpers, especially on the steel bumpered cars. The bumper mountings have got a habit of corroding, and if the bumpers don't sit level, it's an indication that the whole of the car might be a bit iffy. The front wings are actually bolt-on, so if it's particularly tatty, you can replace them easily. The jacking points need checking, of course, and in the boot you want to make sure it's nice and dry. And a scuttle is, a rusty scuttle is the end of the world, really, isn't it? So you don't want to see that. The Touring, you'll find that the tailgate just goes most of the time. You'll never fix it. Don't even try. Just get some silicone spray on the buffers and stuff and try and mitigate it. The convertible, you want the roof to go up and down cleanly, of course, and you don't want any holes in it. It's not a roof like an MGB. It's a proper multi-layered thing, and a new roof is expensive, and it's difficult to fit. It's not an easy DIY one either. You can get most parts, as I said, from BMW actually. Most of the trim is available, and there are still used parts available for seats and things like that. One thing you can't get though, pretty much any price, is a dashboard. They tend to crack in the corners if they've been left in the sun, and most cars have. And you can't even buy that from BMW. So just make sure that the dash is in good nick if you're bothered about that. As for the suspension, well, again, you can get all the parts you need to sort it out, and a lot of cars have been modified with lowering springs and coilovers, but assuming you're looking at a standard car, watch for broken coil springs. Quite often you'll find a car with a broken coil spring, and you won't even notice until you jack it up. And then it just sits slightly unevenly. You can also get a problem with the strut top mounts collapsing, and then there'll be metal on metal, and they're not with predictable consequences. At the rear, you've got the trailing arm bushes, which will make the handling feel a bit iffy. You need a special tool to replace those, so it's not really a DIY job. And at the front, if it feels a little bit imprecise, it wants to wander across the road, and you can feel a sort of shunting when you brake, when you tap the brakes in traffic. It's probably the rear bushes for the front wishbones. You can do those at home if you've got a suitable press, and even if you haven't actually a big hammer, you can do those and sharpen it all up quite nicely. It's quite satisfying. Not expensive either. If it clonks over potholes and speed bumps, probably the drop links, they're easy enough to replace at home with just a couple of spanners. So they are quite a DIY-friendly sort of car. You know, if you buy one that's solid and doesn't need welding work, cosmetic improvements and suspension and brake refresh is quite easy to do at home, and you know, quite rewarding. Something else to watch on the suspension is the struts themselves. The spring seats can rust in extreme cases, and obviously that's not safe. So check that. And again, the trailing arms, in fact, themselves can rust as well. On the subject of safety, make sure that the ABS works. A lot of these cars have got ABS, and the light needs to come on with the ignition and go off when the engine's running for an MOT pass. You can't just take the bulb out or put tape over it. That's not good enough. It's got to come on and go out. You'll also find on the dashboard the check control or service light is often illuminated, and if the service light comes on and you can't reset it, it's because it needs new nickel cadmium batteries on the printed circuit board. You can sort that out. You can solder new tag batteries on, or you can just ignore it. The electrical system is pretty much conventional. It's a bit more sophisticated than, say, a Ford of the same era, but troubleshooting should be easy, and the componentry is generally sort of decent quality. There's none of your Lucas stuff here. You can get odd little problems like on this car, for instance, the electric window on the driver's door only works when the door's open, so there's obviously a loose wire somewhere. But as I said, it's all quite conventional, so you can trace the wires and things like that. So if you want an E30, your biggest problem, aside from finding a standard one, is going to be which one to choose. I like the convertible. It's got room for 4 people. I really like the Touring, and I've had a couple of those. So don't get hung up on which particular model you want. Make sure you know whether you want a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder. There is a big difference between the way they drive. But once you've decided that, just buy on condition rather than a particular model.
This video is proudly sponsored by Lancaster Insurance. Give them a call on 01480 400 889 for an insurance quote on your classic car. And don't forget to click the link below to enter their latest competition.